January 1995, the WTO replaced GATT. China applied to join the same year. This began a succession of to and fro bilateral negotiations with each of the 37 members. None of the negotiations were easy, but those with the US proved by far the most challenging. With the negotiations entering their toughest phase, Jiang Zemin made a forceful statement. We will not be weak, and we must continue dealing with the US. We cannot accept their harsh and unreasonable demands for our accession to the WTO, but must resolutely reject them. Protecting the interests of our country and our people is our most fundamental principle. By contrast with the attitude of the US authorities, American industry and commerce were lobbying Congress to agree to China's accession. To them, a trade agreement would open access to a market of 1.3 billion people for American goods and services. China and the US held 25 rounds of talks. The last of them took place in Beijing on November the 10th, 1999. Even at this late stage, the US was still a long way from meeting China's bottom line. During the meeting, Gene Sperling, Special Economic Advisor to the American president, banged the table. He stood in front of the Chinese delegation and told them, "You'll never, never, never get to enter the WTO on those terms." The Chinese negotiators were unperturbed by the threats and pressure. This kind of bravado was a common American negotiating tactic. The intense battle of words continued, with both sides determined to protect their national interests.
这是正常的，也不可能哪一方失败，指哪一方失败，哪一方赢，这个不可能的，因为双边嘛，美国要维护他的利益，我们要维护中国的利益，这是正常的，只要平等协商，中国就有一个美德，就是互谅互让，是吧？讲道理，我想这谈判才能继续进行下去。
The guidance and correct decisions provided by the CPC ensured that after 6 days and nights of tough talks, a win-win outcome was achieved.
They are very tough, very smart, and focused, very focused on China's interests. And what impressed us about the Chinese team was that it approached the negotiations with certain principles in mind.
At 4 p.m. on November the 15th, 1999, in Beijing, Shi Guangchang and Charlene Barshevsky signed a bilateral agreement on China's WTO entry. 2 years later, in September 2001, China reached a similar agreement with Mexico. With this, China completed bilateral negotiations with every WTO member. It had taken China 15 years to clear the path to WTO entry. Now that it was being treated as an equal by the other members, its opening up entered a new phase.